September 15, 1940. The official residence of the Prime Minister, Tokyo, Japan. The thick haze of cigarette smoke filled the room as Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto crushed out his third lucky strike during the session. The use of American cigarettes was a subtle irony not missed by anyone there. Prime Minister Prince Fumimaro Konoe had posed the question plainly, bypassing the typical evasions common in Japanese diplomatic speech. Should we choose to go to war with America, what are our odds? Yamamoto's answer would linger over the Japanese Empire until its final moments. If I am ordered to engage in combat, no matter the outcome, I will be unstoppable for the first 6 months or a year, but I possess no assurance for the second or third year. The other military leaders present shifted in their seats with unease. Here was the commander-in-chief of the combined fleet, the very person who would lead any conflict with the United States, essentially forecasting Japan's loss before a single battle. They did not fully understand that Yamamoto was not offering a mere guess. He had observed American industrial strength personally, toured its assembly lines, examined its oil facilities, and calculated its production abilities right down to the smallest rivet. The arithmetic of destruction had been settled years before in the classrooms at Harvard, reinforced in Pennsylvania's steel factories, and substantiated among the vast oil rigs of Texas. Yamamoto grasped a reality his peers wished not to face. Japan had already been defeated in any war with America before one even started. Time was the only unknown factor, 6 months. He would allow them half a year of accomplishments before the industrial giant completely mobilized. Isoroku Takano was born April 4, 1884, in Nagaoka, a modest city in Niigata Prefecture, as the sixth son to a destitute schoolteacher. His father was 56 at his birth, leading to the choice of the name Isoroku, which means 56 in Japanese. The family's financial difficulties were overwhelming. Many times, they survived on barley and sweet potatoes, unable to buy rice. These early struggles would later make Yamamoto's recognition of American plenty even more remarkable. In 1916, the young naval officer was taken in by the Yamamoto family, a standard procedure for advancing one's status in Japanese society. By then, he had already lost 2 fingers on his left hand during the Battle of Tsushima in 1905, where he had witnessed Japan's surprising defeat of Russia's Baltic Fleet. That victory had led many Japanese to believe spiritual might could surmount material shortcomings, a myth that Yamamoto would dedicate his life to dispelling. The Tsushima veteran comprehended something his peers overlooked. Japan's win against Russia was possible only because Russia had to exert force across thousands of miles while managing an internal revolution. The United States would be at no such disadvantage. To truly grasp this reality, Yamamoto needed first-hand experience of America. His initial view came in 1919, as a 35-year-old commander, when he received instructions that would alter not just his future but the trajectory of history. Report to Harvard University for English Studies and to monitor American naval progress. What unfolded next would turn a Japanese loyalist into a Cassandra, foretelling disaster that would go unheard. In April 1919, Yamamoto arrived at Harvard brandishing 2 swords and dressed in naval attire, an object of fascination among the vine-covered halls of Cambridge. He joined as a special student, supposedly for English instruction. His records would eventually reveal a mediocre C+ in the English class, but this grade belied the genuine learning underway. While living simply in Brooklyn, Massachusetts, Yamamoto set up a regimen that would have seemed fanatical to onlookers. He slept merely 3 to 4 hours per night, spending the remaining time absorbing every possible detail regarding American industry, petroleum, and aviation. His quarters grew crowded with maps of oil reserves, statistical digests about American manufacture, and scholarly journals concerning steel production. Yamamoto saw the future as being fueled by oil. While the other roughly 70 Japanese students at Harvard during his tenure engaged in regular coursework, Yamamoto devoted hours at Harvard's Widner Library delving into oil geology and refining capacities. He learned that America generated 65% of world oil, amounting to 378 million barrels in 1919 alone. In contrast, Japan needed to import virtually all of its supply, primarily from the United States itself. However, his deepest education occurred during Harvard's summer recesses. Yamamoto would vanish for long stretches, traveling by hitchhiking across the country with little more than a handful of dollars. His initial significant journey brought him to the oil fields of Texas, where he spent 3 weeks investigating extraction techniques and refinery processes. He lived on bread, bananas, and water, sleeping in barns and open fields, reserving his meager funds for extended observations. In the summer of 1920, Yamamoto waited outside Detroit's Ford Highland Park factory and watched employees changing shifts. As 20,000 laborers poured out, most made their way to private cars, a sight unimaginable in Japan, where car ownership among even military personnel was rare. He had traveled 900 meters by hitchhiking from Cambridge to see what Henry Ford referred to as the emancipation of regular people. Claiming to be an engineering student from abroad, Yamamoto gained entry into the plant, where he witnessed firsthand the assembly line that had transformed the way goods were manufactured. Every 45 seconds, a Model T would complete its journey down the line. Workers each executed a single, repetitive task with exact timing. The full transformation from raw steel to a completed car required only 93 minutes. During his week-long stay in Detroit, Yamamoto filled 3 notebooks with notes. His calculations revealed that Ford's number of workers alone surpassed the total personnel of the Japanese Navy. Ford's daily consumption of steel was larger than all of Japan's output in a week. Most striking to him, this was merely one corporation, in a single location, within just one industry. Manufacturing in America has become a science, he wrote to Admiral Thomas A. Barrow, his mentor. They assemble machinery much as we produce rice, methodically, efficiently, and in volumes beyond belief. Every laborer has their own specialty. Every stage is timed. All improvements are adopted immediately. There is no wastage, no lag, no inefficiency. The figures were overwhelming. Automobile output in the United States had risen from 485,000 units in 1915 to 2.3 million by 1920. When Yamamoto visited, car ownership in the U.S. was 1 vehicle for every 13 inhabitants. In contrast, in Japan, it was 1 car per 5,000 individuals. However, Yamamoto recognized an even greater implication beyond the sheer statistics. He realized that the ability to mass-produce civilian vehicles translated directly into the capacity to manufacture military ones. The same lines making Model Ts could easily be converted to build army trucks, tanks, or engines for aircraft. The workers adept at fine manufacturing could as readily construct weapons. The enormous logistical networks feeding Detroit with parts could in turn supply ammunition to frontline troops. In the summer of 1921, shortly before graduating from Harvard, Yamamoto undertook his most ambitious unauthorized trip to Texas. He vanished for a period of 6 weeks, sparking mild diplomatic alarm when he failed to appear at some official events. His purpose was to see what he referred to as the springs of power, the East Texas oil fields. Moving by freight train and on foot, Yamamoto arrived at the Spindletop Field near Beaumont, where the oil industry had first emerged in 1901. Although it was no longer at its zenith, the site still generated thousands of barrels every day. Yamamoto spent several days conversing with rig hands and engineers, learning about extraction methods, drilling speeds, and refinery operations. The enormous scale was beyond anything imaginable to the Japanese. A single well's daily yield surpassed a week's worth of Japan's oil imports. The Texaco refinery at Port Arthur, which Yamamoto carefully drew, processed 100,000 barrels each day. The whole operation used electrical power, including automated pumps and continuous electric lighting. In his journal, Yamamoto noted that oil was the essential resource for modern combat. Ships, aircraft, tanks, and trucks all relied on it for fuel. America held vast reserves underground, while Japan had none. This, he felt, was the decisive fact. Yamamoto continued north to visit newly found oil sites in Kilgore and Longview, witnessing the economic boom that would transform East Texas into the world's preeminent oil-producing area. Drilling rigs rose so thickly from the ground, workers said one could walk from rig to rig without ever touching earth. Waste natural gas was burned off in flares that illuminated surrounding areas for miles at night. The carelessness with resources made an impression on Yamamoto. In Japan, every bit of imported energy was valued, while in America, the amount of natural gas flared daily could have powered Tokyo for an entire month. This everyday abundance, even more than any military display, persuaded him of America's unassailable strength. In January 1926, Yamamoto again traveled to the United States in the role of Japan's naval attaché in Washington, now with the formal rank of captain. His assignment, which lasted until March 1928, affirmed all the apprehensions he had formed during his Harvard tenure. With diplomatic credentials and a legitimate expense account, he enjoyed unrestricted movement and could observe through official channels. His top concern became updating Japan's industrial intelligence network. U.S. output had expanded dramatically since his previous stay. By 1926, American factories were on track to turn out 4.3 million cars, steel production had reached 48 million tons, and oil extraction topped 770 million barrels. These figures were not just increasing, but accelerating. Yamamoto set up a disciplined regimen of field visits. From Monday through Wednesday, he worked at the embassy, participating in naval meetings and social engagements. From Thursday to Sunday, he would travel, remaining focused on three things: manufacturing capability, raw material acquisition, and technological advances. His journeys led him to the Bethlehem steel plant in Pennsylvania, where he watched armor plating for warships being produced. The facility's electric furnaces could complete batches of specialty steel in mere hours, a process that took Japanese factories weeks. With a staff of 30,000, the plant consumed more electricity than all of Kyoto. When he visited Birmingham, Alabama, Yamamoto examined the iron ore supply chains that were essential to U.S. steelmaking. Trainloads of ore would come from Minnesota's Mesabi Range, coal from Pennsylvania, and limestone from Indiana would arrive hourly. He found the efficiency and tight integration of these supply networks astonishing. Goods and materials moved across thousands of miles with flawless coordination, managed by telegraph and telephone systems that far surpassed anything available in Japan. While stationed in Washington, Yamamoto gained notoriety for his poker nights. Each Friday evening, he would hold games in his apartment, inviting American naval officers, diplomats, and intelligence agents. These gatherings were far more than social events. They served as intelligence missions played out amid cards and whiskey. Captain Ellis Zacharias from Naval Intelligence soon became a regular attendee. Years later, Zacharias recounted in his 1946 memoir, Secret Missions, that these poker sessions entailed calculated probing by all participants. As they bluffed during hands, both sides engaged in discreet questioning about naval strategies, ship abilities, and strategic perspectives. Yamamoto excelled at poker, Zacharias wrote. He had the ability to recall every card that had been played, instantly compute odds, and interpret expressions with ease. Yet more significantly, he employed these matches to analyze the American mindset. He sought to uncover how Americans reasoned, how they chose their actions, and how they managed stress. The poker gatherings exposed a vital truth to Yamamoto. Americans were inclined to take risks because they had the means to sustain losses. Their aggressive betting came from the security of wealthy resources. They could lose some hands and still stay at the table. This attitude, Yamamoto deduced, mirrored the broader American military doctrine. The United States could afford the loss of battles, or even prolonged campaigns, and still pursue victory. Conversely, Japan, possessing fewer resources, could not withstand a decisive loss. On a night in February 1926, after taking in a notably large pot, Yamamoto made a remark that Zacharias always remembered. In both poker and warfare, The participant with the largest stack can wait for advantageous cards. Japan, he said, was using borrowed stakes against an opponent who owned the entire bank. It was Yamamoto's insight into aviation that was perhaps most profound during his American tenure. While the majority of naval officers continued to plan around battleships, Yamamoto foresaw aircraft as the key to future naval combat. The U.S. was ideally placed to control this new field. He paid a visit to the Glenn L. Martin Company in Cleveland, Ohio, where assembly line methods, borrowed from automobile production, were used to fabricate aircraft. Many workers completed their training never having seen an airplane before, then proceeded to build intricate planes within mere weeks. The plant turned out 6 airplanes each day, utilizing electrically powered equipment and conveyor belts to accelerate production. At McCook Field, Dayton, Ohio, the future site of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Yamamoto watched American advances in aviation research. The institution boasted a workforce of more aeronautical engineers than existed in the whole of Japan. They possessed resources like wind tunnels, engine testing centers, and materials laboratories far beyond the capacity of Japanese aviation. The statistics made the situation clear. In 1926, the U.S. manufactured 1,186 military airplanes and 5,789 civilian ones. Their airlines were already operating scheduled routes delivering mail and passengers across the country. Japan could barely construct 200 planes per year, and most of those relied on imported parts and engines. The Americans, Yamamoto noted in a dispatch to Tokyo, approached warfare in 3 dimensions. As Japan focused on perfecting battleships, America was constructing the foundation for air combat. The U.S. had an advantage in aluminum output, engine development, and, above all, the means to mass-produce planes by the thousands. Yamamoto's reports, however, received little attention. The Japanese fleet remained committed to battleships and anticipated a decisive surface engagement that Yamamoto knew was unlikely. Aircraft carriers were still viewed as supplemental, useful mainly for gathering intelligence, not as game changers in combat. In the summer of 1926, Yamamoto embarked on his most detailed exploration of U.S. industry. By leveraging his official position and relationships, he arranged tours of industrial sites typically closed to foreigners. Each inspection provided yet another piece of evidence that supported his conviction regarding American industrial superiority. At the River Rouge facility in Dearborn, Michigan, Yamamoto saw firsthand the unmatched comprehensiveness of U.S. industrial production. Covering a 2,000-acre area, the complex resembled a self-contained metropolis. Iron arrived by ship, coal by rail, and rubber came from Firestone's Liberian plantations. Every step from raw material processing to completion occurred on the premises. The operation employed a workforce of 100,000 people and featured its own power station capable of generating 400,000 horsepower. Yamamoto found the scale astonishing despite his prior research. Tall blast furnaces ran ceaselessly, assembly lines stretched enormous distances, and 25,000 worker vehicles filled parking areas, more cars than entire Japanese cities possessed. At the Bayway refinery run by Standard Oil in New Jersey, Yamamoto observed oil refining conducted on a massive scale. This refinery handled 100,000 barrels a day and turned out hundreds of oil products beyond just fuel, ranging from lubricants to specialty chemicals. Catalytic cracking towers, developed only a few years before, enabled twice the gasoline yield per barrel as Japanese plants could achieve. They have unlocked the secret of waging modern war, Yamamoto noted. An endless supply of raw resources, boundless capacity for production, and infinite inventiveness ensured America's ultimate success. Japan, he acknowledged, possessed none of these strategic strengths. In the latter part of 1926, Yamamoto journeyed to California, officially to attend a naval conference in San Francisco, but his true purpose was to evaluate the strength of America's Pacific assets. He discovered a coastline that was rapidly evolving into an unassailable bastion of industrial might. At the May Island Naval Shipyard in Vallejo, Both the construction and repair of capital ships were carried out at the same time. This site boasted electrical capabilities surpassing those of all Japanese Navy bases put together. Around San Francisco Bay stood a ring of military outposts, each one surpassing anything that existed in Japan. In Los Angeles, Yamamoto witnessed the emergence of the aviation sector destined to seal Japan's fate. The Douglas Aircraft Company, established just 6 years before, was already manufacturing cutting-edge planes utilizing novel stressed skin techniques. With 300 engineers, the firm was developing designs that it would take another 10 years for Japan to acquire. Yet, the aspect that struck Yamamoto deepest was Southern California's oil reserves. The Los Angeles region included over 20 significant oil fields. Signal Hill alone housed 265 wells crammed together like a metallic woodland. Each year, California generated 230 million barrels of oil, exceeding what Japan would use in 5 years of warfare. The docks revealed another reality. Both San Pedro and Long Beach were growing swiftly, installing electrically powered cranes and systems for automated cargo handling. One berth by itself could process more freight in a single day than Tokyo's port managed in an entire week. The necessary infrastructure to exert military force across the Pacific already existed. On his return to Japan in March 1928, Yamamoto prepared a 200-page analysis of American strengths, a document that should have dissuaded any further thought of war. His assessments were uncompromising. The manufacturing output of America surpassed Japan's by 10 to 20 times in every essential field. American petroleum production stood at 100 times the rate of Japanese usage. Steel emerged from American furnaces at 12 times the Japanese amount. America's automobile sector illustrated an assembly line competence that could be rapidly adapted to make war materiel. American aviation technology was advancing at such a pace that Japan was doomed to lag behind. The report, once classified and filed, ended up mostly ignored. The Navy Ministry zeroed in only on the parts regarding U.S. shipbuilding, discarding the broader industrial context as irrelevant to the Navy's concerns. The Army, while planning its campaign in China, paid no heed to Yamamoto's cautions about U.S. industrial strength. Increasingly, Yamamoto found himself alone. His exposure to America, rather than being viewed favorably, became a suspicion. Some whispered that he was overly influenced by American ways. Things like preferring coffee to tea, choosing Lucky Strike cigarettes, and reading U.S. periodicals served to single him out as someone tainted by foreign ideas. Still, Yamamoto persisted in voicing his concerns. Through countless lectures and published articles, he relentlessly repeated the same argument. Japan would not prevail against America in a lengthy conflict. The differences in industry were more than just numeric, they were about quality as well. America had established a system for constantly improving invention and output. Japan, with its narrow resources and rigid social structure, was incapable of keeping pace with that energy. By the year 1939, Yamamoto's steadfast resistance to war with the U.S. made him a marked man among extremist officers in the army. The same factions responsible for killing moderate politicians now concentrated on the admiral who refused to support a war with America. The danger became grave enough for Navy Minister Admiral Mitsumasa Yonai, a fellow opponent of war, to assign Yamamoto to sea command as head of the combined fleet. The post, publicized on August 30, 1939, was intended directly to safeguard Yamamoto's life. Out at sea, he would be beyond the army radicals' reach. The irony was stark. The individual most committed to avoiding war against America was now given authority over the very forces that would have to engage in it. Yamamoto comprehended the harsh reality. Should war erupt, Japan required its most capable tactician at the fleet's helm, even if he believed the war was unwinnable. "They have placed the combined fleet under my command," he wrote in a letter to his friend Yoshida. "It feels like being assigned surgery on a patient determined to end their own life. Perhaps I can postpone the suffering, but I cannot avert the fatal outcome."